Hi, and thank you for watching us here at Tax Talk UK, where we talk about all things tax and consider other important aspects of working for yourself, being self-employed, running a small business, as well as helping everybody to understand the tax system as it applies to their circumstances. So today I'm going to talk about registering for self-assessment. Before I do that, if you're new here, please do take a moment to subscribe to our YouTube channel. That way you'll easily be able to refer back to this information if you should need to, as well as being able to access other information that we have available on a whole host of different topics, all aimed at supporting you and helping you to navigate the tax system as it applies to you. So back then to registering for self-assessment. So this has caused a little bit of confusion, and when people are trying to register in which option then they need to select. And I talk about this more in other videos, but just to clarify, we're talking about registering for self-assessment means that you're telling HMRC that you need to submit a self-assessment tax return. Registering for self-employment or as a sole trader is a separate, although in some ways combined thing. So if you this is most confusing for people who aren't self-employed. So what is happening is by telling HMRC that you need to register to send a self-assessment tax return. In the UK, we effectively have two kind of separate and loosely connected systems for paying our income tax. They are the PAYE system that's collected at source through your tax code, and the self-assessment system. So there is some overlap in that, for example, if you are submitting a self-assessment tax return, you would include income that's taxed at source and the tax that has been deducted. And there are some circumstances where you can have any tax liability incurred through the self-assessment tax return system collected through your tax code. So there are some sort of connections, but the important thing for this purposes that you need to be aware of is for the PAYE system, uses our national insurance number, which generally people get issued automatically at the eligible age. The self-assessment tax return system uses a 10-digit UTR number. Now the UTR number is only issued once it's needed, so it's not automatically issued. Once it's been issued, once you have a UTR number assigned to you, that is the same as with your national insurance. That is your UTR number for always. There are some circumstances where it would change, but generally speaking, it would always be your UTR number. So effectively, as a non-self-employed person needing to submit a self-assessment tax return, so that you've got income perhaps that's not taxed at source, that can't be notified in any other way, that you need to sort of be notifying the income through self-assessment, then you will be issued with your 10-digit UTR number, and then that will enable you to submit your self-assessment tax return. So therefore, when you first start to register for a self-assessment tax return, it's going to ask you, the system is going to ask you if you're self-employed, if you're a partner, or if you have another reason. So if you're not, and the reason for that is because if you're self-employed or a partner, then there is some sort of national insurance registration that HMRC need to make sure that's happening as well. And they need to know that you're self-employed. If it's for another reason, then they just need to issue you really with the UTR number and know that you need to submit a self-assessment tax return. So you would just select that it was the other reason, and then you would have the option to say why you needed to submit. And sometimes people don't, they're not obliged to submit a self-assessment tax return, but because their tax affairs are quite complex, they prefer to, so that they can check that everything's been collected correctly themselves in a timely manner. So there is the option to say that you want to register for another reason, and then you'll receive your UTR number, and then you can register that on the gateway, and then that will enable you to submit a self-assessment tax return. If you have previously submitted self-assessment tax returns, or for some reason historically you had a UTR number, then of course HMRC won't need to send you the new UTR, and you can simply add that to your gateway account. Now, one thing that's really important, we're obviously mostly focusing today on actually registering for self-assessment tax return, predominantly if you're not a sole trader or partner, because we cover those in other videos of how to do that. But it's also really important to mention that once you've registered, you need to check the first period that a return is required for, and once you no longer do need to submit a self-assessment tax return, you must notify HMRC, because as long as they are expecting a tax return, if it's not submitted by the deadline, you will incur penalties. So in order for that not to happen, HMRC need to know that you don't any longer need to submit the self-assessment tax return, and you can do that on the last tax return that you submit, or you can call them or write to them depending on how much time you have before the deadline. So hopefully this helps to clarify. So registering for a self-assessment tax return is a different thing to registering as a self-employed or a sole trader. Although if you are doing that, you do need to register for self-assessment tax return unless you've engaged somebody to do that for you. But as I say, we do cover that in another video. So hopefully that's been helpful. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.